I thought I was about to sign papers to let my sister die peacefully. But a trembling nurse grabbed my hand and whispered, "Please don't sign anything. Give me 10 minutes. And trust me." Those 10 minutes exposed a betrayal so cruel. It nearly cost my sister her life. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe for more real stories, and tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. Now, let me tell you how a routine hospital decision turned into a fight for my sister's life. That Tuesday afternoon is burned into my memory. I rushed through the sliding doors of St. Mary's Hospital believing I was about to make the hardest decision of my life. The doctors had told us my sister was gone in every way that mattered. They said signing the comfort care papers would simply allow her to pass with dignity. I wanted to believe them. My younger sister, Diana, was only 58. 2 weeks earlier we'd shared lunch, laughed about aching knees, and talked about her dream of finally visiting Italy. Now she lay motionless in an ICU bed, surrounded by machines breathing for her. Her husband, Richard, stood on the opposite side of the bed. He looked tired, too calm, too prepared. The paperwork was already waiting, neatly stacked, a pen placed carefully on top. "Thank you for coming, Martha," he said softly. "The doctors agree it's time." I reached for the pen. That's when it happened. A young nurse appeared beside me and wrapped her fingers tightly around my wrist. Her hand was shaking, but her grip was firm. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't sign anything. Just give me 10 minutes. I promise you'll understand." I froze. Her eyes weren't dramatic or emotional. They were terrified. I looked from her face to Richard's. His smile didn't reach his eyes. For just a second, something sharp flickered across his expression. Irritation, maybe even panic. "This is a family matter," he snapped. "You're out of line." But the nurse didn't let go. "I need to speak privately with Miss Reynolds," she said, steadying her voice. "Hospital protocol." Something deep in my chest tightened. I'd been a nurse myself for 40 years before retiring. I knew fear when I saw it, and I knew when something didn't feel right. 10 minutes, I said quietly, setting the pen down. "I need air." Richard's jaw clenched, but he nodded. He had no choice. As the nurse hurried me into a small consultation room and locked the door, her composure finally broke. "I could lose my job for this," she said, hands trembling. "But I can't stand by and watch your sister be killed." The word hit me like ice. "Killed?" I whispered. "What are you talking about?" "She isn't brain dead," the nurse said. "She's heavily sedated. Her reflexes are still there. Her brain activity is still present." My medical training surged back to life. Brain-dead patients don't respond to pain. They don't grimace. They don't fight sedation. "She reacted?" I asked. The nurse nodded. "Yes. When no one else was in the room." My stomach dropped. She told me about medications being increased without proper documentation. About 4 bags changed off schedule. About my brother-in-law insisting on being present during evaluations. And then she showed me photographs. Time-stamped images of Richard leaning over my sister's fore. Another woman, younger, stylish, watching the door. A medication label that didn't belong. "Who is that woman?" I asked. "She's not hospital staff," the nurse said. "And she's not a grief counselor." Everything suddenly made sense. The urgency. The paperwork. The pressure. "They need your signature," the nurse whispered. "Once life support is removed, there's no coming back." I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. "All right," I said finally. "We're not signing anything yet." "But he'll get suspicious," she warned. "I know," I said. "That's why we're going to let him think I am." I walked back toward my sister's room with a plan forming in my mind. A dangerous one. As if I was right. The man standing at her bedside wasn't grieving. He was waiting. And in the next few minutes, one wrong move could cost Diana her life. I walked back into my sister's ICU room wearing the same face I perfected over decades in emergency medicine. Calm, controlled, cooperative. Inside, my heart was racing. Richard straightened the moment he saw me. That practiced concern returned instantly, like a mask he'd put back on. "Are you okay?" he asked. That nurse seemed dramatic. "I just needed clarification," I said, forcing a tired smile. It's a lot to process. Cassidy stood beside him now, close enough that their shoulders brushed. She didn't step away when I entered. She didn't pretend anymore. I took note of everything. The way Richard's fingers hovered near the paperwork. The way Cassidy's eyes kept darting to the door. The way neither of them looked at my sister for more than a second. I picked up the papers. I want to do this right, I said gently. As a nurse, I need to understand exactly what we're agreeing to. Richard's expression tightened just slightly. The doctors have explained it all, he said. There's no brain activity. No hope. I know that's what Dr. Carlson said, I replied, flipping a page. But I've seen aneurysm cases recover after prolonged sedation. Did Diana have imaging done? A CT scan? An angiogram? Cassidy shifted uncomfortably. The scan showed catastrophic damage, Richard said quickly. They were conclusive. I'd like to see them, I said. Silence. Richard's face flushed. Martha, now really isn't the time. I disagree, I said calmly. This is exactly the time. Cassidy stepped in. You're prolonging things unnecessarily. Diana wouldn't want this. I looked at her. Really looked. And how long have you known what Diana wanted? I asked softly. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Richard cleared his throat. That's enough. These questions aren't helping anyone. They're helping me, I replied. And I'm the one holding the pen. That was when Richard made his mistake. The costs are mounting, he said, his voice sharp with frustration. Every extra day on these machines drains her estate. She wouldn't want to waste money on false hope. There it was. Estate. Not suffering. Not dignity. Money. I nodded slowly, pretending to absorb his words while my suspicion hardened into certainty. Before I sign, I said, I just want to understand the timeline. Richard hesitated. You said she collapsed at home. What time was that? Around 9, he said. And you called emergency services immediately? Another pause. I checked on her first, he said. Maybe 10 minutes passed. 10 minutes. A lifetime during a neurological event. 10 minutes is a long time, I said quietly. Every second counts with a brain injury. Cassidy squeezed his hand. He did the best he could, she said. I'm sure, I replied evenly. Cassidy, how long have you worked with the hospital? She blinked. I'm not staff. I was assigned through. Which agency? I pressed. I'd love to commend them. Richard slammed his hand lightly on the bedside table. That's enough, he snapped. Are you signing or not? I looked at my sister. Pale. Still. Breathing only because machines allowed her to. I need 5 minutes alone with her, I said, my voice breaking just enough to be believable. To say goodbye properly. Richard shook his head. We've all said. Please, I whispered. She's all I have left. For a moment I thought he might refuse. But refusing would expose him. 5 minutes, he said finally. We'll wait outside. As they left, I saw Richard glance back at the paperwork. At the pen. At the clock. The moment the door closed, I rushed to Diana's side and took her hand. Hold on, I whispered. Please. And then I saw it. The faintest flutter beneath her eyelids. So subtle it could have been dismissed as wishful thinking. But I knew better. She was still there. The door opened quietly and Nurse Jenkins slipped inside. Dr. Patel reviewed her chart, she whispered. He's furious. Her sedation is 3 times higher than it should be. He's already ordered it reduced. Relief flooded me. And the footage? I asked. She held up a tablet. 72 hours, she said. You need to see this. As the video fast-forwarded, my blood ran cold. Richard adjusting 4 bags when no one was watching. Cassidy keeping lookout. The 2 of them kissing in the hallway. And then the final clip. Richard entering their bedroom that morning, holding a syringe. 30 minutes later, the 911 call. He caused this, I whispered. Yes, Jenkins said. And security and police are on their way. My hands clenched into fists. Then we need to keep him here, I said. Long enough for them to arrive. I walked back into that room knowing 2 things for certain. Richard believed he had already won. And in the next few minutes, I was going to let him think that, right up until the moment everything collapsed. I took a breath before opening the door. In my years as an ER nurse, I'd learned that panic makes people careless. Calm makes them talk. And Richard, for all his confidence, was already unraveling. When I stepped back into the room, I wore grief like a familiar coat. Heavy shoulders, red eyes, a slight tremble in my hands. Richard looked up immediately. "Are you ready?" he asked too quickly. Cassidy stood beside him, arms crossed, her jaw tight. She tried to look sympathetic, but impatience leaked through her expression. "I think so," I said softly. "I just needed a moment with her." Richard exhaled, relieved. "Good. Then let's not drag this out." I moved slowly to the bedside, smoothing my sister's blanket, brushing her hair back from her forehead. Up close I could see it again, the faint flutter beneath her eyelids, the almost imperceptible tension in her fingers. She was fighting. "I'm going to sign," I said quietly, reaching for the pen. "But I need one small thing first." Richard stiffened. "What?" "I want to be present when the ventilator is withdrawn," I said. "Professionally and personally." Cassidy frowned. "Why would you want to watch that?" "Because she's my sister," I replied evenly. "And because no one should die alone." Richard hesitated. I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. The more people in the room, the more risk. But refusing now would look suspicious. "Fine," he said. "If it gives you peace." I signed the paperwork. Or rather, I signed a copy. The real authorization was still locked in the charge nurse's office, flagged and frozen. Richard didn't know that. He watched the pen stroke across the page like a finish line being crossed. "Thank you," he said, his voice suddenly gentle. "You did the right thing." I almost laughed. The doctor entered moments later, followed by 2 nurses. One of them, not Jenkins, avoided looking at Richard entirely. "We'll begin shortly," the doctor said. "Family may remain." I took my place on the left side of the bed. Richard stood on the right. Cassidy lingered near the foot, arms wrapped tightly around herself. The machines hummed steadily. I leaned close to my sister's ear. "I'm here," I whispered. "Don't let go." Her finger twitched. Just once. But I felt it. Richard didn't. The doctor reached for the ventilator controls. "Wait," Richard said suddenly. "Shouldn't we?" Before he could finish, the door opened. 2 hospital security officers stepped inside, followed by a uniformed police officer. Richard turned, startled. "What's this?" The officer's voice was calm but firm. "Richard Hayes, we need you to step away from the bed." Cassidy's face drained of color. "This is ridiculous," Richard snapped. "We're in the middle of a private family matter." The doctor stepped back. "This procedure is on hold." I turned to Richard then. Slowly, deliberately. "You shouldn't have rushed," I said quietly. His eyes locked onto mine. "What did you do?" "I asked questions," I replied. "The kind you didn't want answered." The officer held up a tablet. "We have security footage showing you tampering with 4 medications over the last 3 days. We also have evidence placing you alone with Diana shortly before her collapse." Cassidy shook her head. "That's not." "And," the officer continued, "we have text messages recovered from your phone coordinating this with Miss Collins." Cassidy let out a strangled sound. Richard's face twisted. "You don't understand. She was suffering." "No," I said. "She was inconvenient." The officer stepped closer. "Mr. Hayes, you are under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud." The words landed like thunder. Richard lunged toward me, rage finally breaking through his mask. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "She's still going to die." Before I could answer, a sound cut through the room. A gasp. Soft, fragile, but unmistakable. The machines began to alarm. "Doctor," I said sharply. "She's breathing on her own." The doctor rushed forward. "She's responding." Cassidy collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Richard stared at the bed, his face hollow. As security led him away, his eyes never left my sister. "You ruined everything," he whispered. I didn't respond. All my attention was on the woman whose hand now tightened weakly around mine. She wasn't gone. She wasn't even close. Later, as they stabilized her and rushed her for imaging, I sat alone in the waiting room, my hands still shaking. I'd spent my life saving strangers. I never imagined the hardest fight would be for my own blood. Nurse Jenkins sat beside me. "She has a long road ahead," she said. "But she's alive because you didn't look away." I nodded, swallowing hard. Outside the ICU doors, police voices echoed. Phones rang. Footsteps hurried past. But inside me something settled. Justice wasn't loud. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and relentless. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Because surviving what Richard did was only the beginning. What Diana remembered, and what she would soon reveal, was far more dangerous than anyone expected. The ICU was quieter after midnight. Machines still hummed, nurses still moved softly between rooms, but the urgency had shifted. Diana was no longer fighting for each breath. Now her body was resting, healing, preparing to wake. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand, afraid that if I let go she might disappear again. Dr. Patel joined me. His expression measured but hopeful. "The scans show swelling," he said. "But there's no catastrophic brain death. Whatever dosage she was given suppressed her neurological response." I closed my eyes. "She was drugged." "Yes," he said. "Deliberately." My grip tightened around Diana's hand. "She may remember," he continued. "Or she may not. Trauma has a way of hiding itself." I nodded. I'd seen it too many times to argue. Hours passed. The room grew dimmer. At some point, exhaustion pulled my head down to the mattress beside her arm. I woke to pressure. Not the machines. Not a nurse. Fingers. Diana's fingers curling weakly around mine. I lifted my head slowly, afraid of startling her. "Diana," I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. Once. Twice. Then they opened. They were unfocused at first, cloudy with medication and pain. But they found me. "Martha," she breathed. The sound of my name undid me. "I'm here," I said quickly. "You're safe." She tried to speak again, but her throat caught. I reached for water, helping her sip carefully. Her eyes darted toward the door. Is he gone?" "Yes," I said gently. "He can't hurt you anymore." She swallowed hard. "I knew," she whispered. "I knew something was wrong." I leaned closer. "What do you remember?" Her gaze drifted to the ceiling, her breath shallow. "I woke up early," she said slowly. He was already dressed. That was strange. I stayed silent, letting her pace herself. "He brought me tea," she continued. "Said it would help my headache." My stomach tightened. "I drank a few sips," she said. "It tasted bitter." She paused, her fingers trembling. I remember feeling heavy, like my body didn't belong to me anymore. Tears filled her eyes. "He stood over me," she whispered. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I squeezed her hand. "You don't have to." "I need to," she said, firmer now. I heard him on the phone. My heart pounded. He said, "She won't make it through the night." And then he laughed. I felt something inside me harden into ice. "There was someone else," Diana continued. "A woman. I saw her reflection in the mirror. Cassidy. They talked about money," she said. "About being free." Her breathing grew uneven. "I tried to scream," she whispered. But nothing came out. The door opened softly and Dr. Patel stepped in, alerted by the monitor. He gave me a look that said this was enough for now. I nodded. "You did everything you could," I told Diana. "You survived." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her temples. Later that morning, detectives arrived. They spoke gently, letting Diana rest between questions. I sat nearby, watching her summon strength I knew cost her dearly. She repeated her story. Every detail. The phone call. The laughter. The detective nodded gravely. "This confirms what we already suspected," he said. "Your testimony is powerful." Powerful. I never thought of survival that way before. As they left, Diana looked at me. "I didn't want to believe it," she said. "I thought I was imagining things." "You weren't," I said. "You trusted your instincts. That matters." She smiled faintly. "You always did say that." I laughed softly through tears. In the days that followed, news spread quickly. Richard's arrest made headlines. So did Cassidy's cooperation agreement. She'd turned on him within hours, offering everything she knew in exchange for leniency. But the victory felt hollow. Diana struggled with nightmares, with sudden panic, with the knowledge that the man she trusted had nearly ended her life. And I struggled with guilt. I was her sister, a nurse. I should have seen the signs sooner. One evening, as I helped her sit up for dinner, she caught me staring. "You're blaming yourself," she said. I didn't deny it. She reached out, touching my cheek. "You saved me," she said. "Twice. Don't take that away from me." Her words stayed with me long after I left the hospital that night. Because saving someone doesn't always mean preventing the harm. Sometimes it means refusing to let the truth stay buried. I believed the danger had passed. But as the trial approached, new evidence surfaced. And someone from Richard's past came forward with a warning. That would change everything we thought we knew. The first letter arrived 3 days before Richard's arraignment. It was addressed to me. Not the hospital. Not the police. My name. My home address. Written carefully like someone who wanted to be remembered. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. "You don't know how many women there were." That was all it said. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time staring at those words. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. The same clock Diana used to tease me about when we were children. I folded the letter and placed it in my bag. Some instincts never leave you. This wasn't a threat. It was a confession. I brought it to the detective handling the case the next morning. He read it once. Then again. "This isn't the first time we've heard something like this," he admitted. "But we've never been able to prove a pattern." My stomach sank. "You mean he's done this before?" "Possibly," he said. "But victims like this rarely come forward. Especially when the perpetrator is someone they trusted." The words settled heavily between us. Later that afternoon, Diana's condition improved enough for her to be moved out of ICU. I helped her into a wheelchair, careful with every motion. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said lightly. "Something like that," I replied. I debated telling her about the letter. In the end I did. Her face grew still as she listened. "He made me feel foolish," she said quietly. "Like I was lucky he tolerated me." That sentence hurt more than anything Richard had done. "Abuse rarely starts with violence," I said. "It starts with erosion." She nodded. "He used to say no one else would want me. That I was difficult. Fragile." My hands clenched around the wheelchair handles. That night, another message arrived. This time an email. "He almost killed me too." No name. No signature. Just a phone number. I didn't hesitate. The woman who answered sounded older than me. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I saw his arrest on the news," she said. "I thought I was the only one." Her name was Eleanor. She lived 2 states away. She'd been married to Richard 12 years earlier. "He told everyone I was unstable," she said. "When I collapsed, he blamed my heart condition." "Did he benefit financially?" I asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Insurance. The house. Everything." My breath caught. "Did anyone investigate?" She laughed bitterly. Who would have believed me? The detective arranged to meet her the next day. Then another woman came forward. And another. Each story carried the same rhythm. Isolation. Control. Medication. Sudden illness. Near death. Survival by chance. By the end of the week, 5 women had spoken. The media reframed the case. No longer a crime of passion. A pattern of predation. Diana followed every update. Her expression a mix of horror and grim validation. "I wasn't crazy," she said one evening. "I knew something was wrong." "No," I said. "You were targeted." That distinction mattered. The prosecution added new charges. The case grew larger. Heavier. And then something unexpected happened. Cassidy requested a meeting. "I want immunity," she said, sitting across from the prosecutor. "I'll give you everything." I watched from the back of the room, my jaw tight. "Why now?" the prosecutor asked. Cassidy's voice cracked. "Because he promised me the same future." She looked at Diana. And I saw what that future really meant. She handed over messages, bank transfers, recordings, evidence that stretched back years. When the meeting ended, Diana leaned into me, exhausted. "He almost won," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "But not anymore." Still something gnawed at me. Patterns don't form without practice. And predators rarely stop unless forced. As I walked to my car that night, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number." I answered. "You should stop digging," a voice said softly. "Some things are better left buried." The line went dead. I stood frozen in the parking lot, the night air sharp against my skin. For the first time since Richard's arrest, fear crept in. Because someone else knew. And they didn't want the truth uncovered. The case was no longer just about Richard. It was about how far his influence reached. And who was willing to silence the truth. Before it all came into the light, I didn't tell Diana about the call. Not right away. She'd already survived too much. And I could see how every new detail carved fresh worry into her face. Some truths need timing. But I told the detective. He listened without interrupting, then asked a question that chilled me. "Did the voice sound confident?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Like they weren't afraid." He nodded. "That suggests leverage." Leverage. The word echoed in my mind as I drove home. Over the next week, the case shifted again. Financial analysts began tracing Richard's accounts. What they found wasn't just inheritance money or insurance payouts. It was layered, cleaned, moved through shell accounts. Someone had helped him. He wasn't acting alone, the prosecutor admitted during a briefing. Not entirely. Names surfaced. A private physician who'd written questionable prescriptions. A financial advisor who'd looked the other way. A caregiver referral service that never asked questions. All of them claimed ignorance. But ignorance leaves patterns too. Diana's recovery was slow but steady. Physical therapy in the mornings. Counseling in the afternoons. At night, she slept with the lights on. "He used to watch me sleep," she told me once. "Like he was waiting." I squeezed her hand. "He can't reach you anymore." But part of me wasn't sure. One afternoon, as Diana rested, I met Eleanor at a quiet cafe near the courthouse. She wore a scarf pulled high around her neck, like she wanted to disappear. "He taught me how to doubt myself," she said. "By the time I realized something was wrong, I didn't trust my own memory." I nodded. "That's how control works." She leaned closer. "I remember a doctor. Not Richard. Someone else. He came to the house once." That detail snapped into place. "Did you ever give a statement about him?" I asked. No one asked. The detective did now. Within days, the doctor was brought in for questioning. He denied everything. But his records didn't. Dosage patterns. Timing. Selective amnesia in documentation. The web tightened. Then the call came again. This time I was ready. "You won't scare me," I said before the voice could speak. A pause. "You're persistent," the voice replied. "That's dangerous." "Who are you?" I asked. Someone laughed softly. "Someone who cleans up messes." The line went dead. I sat there, heart pounding. They weren't threatening violence. They were threatening disappearance. The next morning, evidence went missing. One folder. Gone. Security footage mysteriously corrupted. The prosecutor called an emergency meeting. "This case is being interfered with," she said. "Internally or externally." I watched Diana absorb that information, her hands trembling. "They'll make it go away," she said. "No," I said firmly. "Not this time." Because the women had something they'd never had before. Each other. They held a joint press conference 2 days later. 5 survivors. One story. They spoke calmly, clearly, together. The media attention exploded. And with it, protection. It's harder to erase something once it's seen. That night I stood on my porch watching the street. A car idled briefly at the corner before driving off. The fear returned, but so did resolve. Because someone had underestimated something powerful. Quiet people are often mistaken for weak ones. They forget we're the ones who notice everything. The trial was approaching. But before it began, one final truth surfaced. A detail so carefully hidden. It explained everything Richard had done. The truth surfaced quietly. Not in a dramatic confession or a courtroom reveal, but in a dusty box pulled from a county archive by an overworked clerk who almost didn't bother opening it. Inside were medical records from 25 years earlier. Richard Hayes' name appeared again and again, but not as a husband, as a beneficiary. The woman listed was his first wife. Cause of death: complications from sedation following a minor surgical procedure. At the time it had been ruled natural. The attending physician had retired 2 months later. The hospital had since closed. Patterns don't begin in adulthood. They're practiced. The detective laid the file out on the table between us. This was his rehearsal, he said. The first time he learned it worked. I felt a chill run through me. All those women. All those years. He'd perfected patience. Learned how to wait. How to let medicine do the work. Diana read the report in silence. She was only 34, she whispered. Yes, I said. And alone. The trial date was moved up. Public pressure was relentless. Advocacy groups stepped in. Legal analysts dissected every development. And still Richard said nothing. Not a plea. Not a denial. Just silence. Until the day before jury selection. He asked to speak with me. Alone. The prosecutor advised against it. I went anyway. He sat across from me in a small interview room. Orange uniform stark against the gray walls. He looked thinner. Older. But his eyes were the same. I always wondered when someone like you would come along, he said calmly. I said nothing. You were inconvenient, he continued. You noticed too much. I saved my sister, I said. No, he replied. You interrupted the ending. The words landed with deliberate cruelty. I loved her in my way, he added. I leaned forward. Your way kills people. He smiled faintly. People die all the time. I stood. We're done. As I turned to leave, he spoke again. They'll never understand what you took from me. I didn't look back. The courtroom was packed on the first day of testimony. Diana sat beside me, steady despite the weight of everything she carried. One by one the women spoke. Not emotionally. Not theatrically. They spoke factually. That was more devastating than tears. Medical experts followed. Financial analysts. Behavioral psychologists. The defense unraveled quickly. Too much evidence. Too many voices. But then, something unexpected happened. Cassidy took the stand. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She told the truth. About the promises. The money. The future she thought she was buying. I didn't think he'd go that far, she said. The prosecutor's voice was quiet. You stood watch. Cassidy swallowed. Yes. The courtroom held its breath. That was the moment when complicity became undeniable. As the trial neared its end, the judge dismissed the jury for the weekend. We waited. Tension pressed into every breath. That night Diana turned to me. What if they don't convict? She asked. They will, I said. Because truth has weight. But even as I said it, doubt flickered. Because men like Richard don't rely on innocence. They rely on exhaustion. The verdict was coming. But before it was read, Richard made one final move. One last attempt to control the story. From behind bars. The letter arrived the morning the jury was set to deliberate. No return address. No legal seal. Just my name, written with the same careful precision I'd seen before. I didn't open it right away. I stood in the courthouse hallway, the air thick with murmured conversations and the rustle of paper, and held the envelope between my fingers like it might burn me. Diana noticed immediately. Don't, she said softly. Whatever it is. But I already knew who it was from. I opened it anyway. Martha, you and I both know trials aren't about truth. They're about stories. And I was always better at telling them. My stomach tightened. You've turned me into a monster. But monsters aren't born, they're made. You should ask yourself how much responsibility you carry for what happens next. There it was. Not remorse. Reframing. I folded the letter and handed it to the detective without a word. He's trying to unsettle you, he said. Classic behavior. It won't work, I replied. But I was lying. Because words like those don't attack your logic, they attack your doubt. Inside the courtroom, the judge addressed the jury with calm authority. The case was handed over. We were told to wait. Hours passed. Diana rested her head against my shoulder. Exhaustion etched into her features. Around us, reporters whispered. Attorneys paced. Families waited in fragile silence. Then the bailiff opened the door. Jury has reached a verdict. Time slowed. We stood. The foreperson rose, hands trembling slightly as she read. On the charge of attempted murder. Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Guilty. On the charge of aggravated abuse of a vulnerable adult. Guilty. A sound escaped Diana. Something between a breath and a sob. I closed my eyes. Richard didn't move. Not when the words were read. Not when the courtroom reacted. He just stared forward, his expression unreadable. Sentencing was scheduled for a later date. As deputies led him away, he finally turned. Our eyes met. There was no anger there. Only calculation. Later that evening, back at Diana's apartment, the silence felt heavier than the courtroom. It's over, she said. Yes, I replied. Legally. She looked at me. But not for you. I didn't answer, because something still felt unfinished. 2 days later, the detective confirmed it. Someone attempted to access sealed evidence last night, he said. It failed, but it confirms your instincts. Who? I asked. He hesitated. We're still tracing it. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table again. The same clock. The same quiet. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. You won, the voice said. But winning has consequences. I'm listening, I replied. There are people who benefited from him staying free, the voice continued. You disrupted a system. Then it deserved disrupting, I said. Silence. Then, be careful. The call ended. I didn't sleep, because I finally understood something important. Richard wasn't the end of the story. He was a symptom. The sentencing would bring closure for the courtroom. But outside those walls, the truth was still unraveling. And what surfaced next would change my life forever. Sentencing day arrived without ceremony. No reporters. No crowd. Just a gray morning and the quiet knowledge that something permanent was about to happen. Richard entered the courtroom in a prison-issued suit that hung too loosely on his frame. His hair had gone more gray in the weeks since the verdict, but his posture hadn't changed. He still carried himself like a man who believed he belonged wherever he stood. The judge spoke carefully. Each charge, each statute, each consequence. Years were listed like measurements, precise, impersonal, unavoidable. When the sentence was read, Richard finally reacted. Not with outrage, not with denial, but with a slow nod. As if this too had been anticipated. As if he were already calculating what came next. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, his attorney declined. But Richard leaned forward anyway. May I speak? He asked. The judge hesitated, then allowed it. Richard turned not toward the court but toward me. I hope you find what you're looking for, he said calmly. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of harm. Just a sentence designed to linger. As deputies escorted him out, I felt something unexpected. Not relief. Not victory. But a hollow quiet where closure was supposed to be. Outside, Diana exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. It's done, she said again. I nodded. But later that afternoon when I returned home, the emptiness followed me. The house felt unfamiliar. Too quiet. I poured a cup of tea and sat at the table, staring at nothing in particular, when I noticed something odd. My laptop was open. I was certain I'd closed it before leaving. On the screen was an email draft. No subject. No recipient. Just a single sentence typed in the body. You should stop digging. My hands went cold. I hadn't written it. I checked the sent folder. Nothing. Drafts. Only that one. The detective answered on the second ring. Has anyone contacted you again? He asked immediately. No, I said. But someone accessed my laptop. Silence. Are you alone? Yes. Lock your doors, he said. I'm sending someone. By the time the patrol car arrived, the draft had vanished. No trace. No metadata. No explanation. The officer took notes but didn't look surprised. This isn't about intimidation, he said quietly. It's about containment. That night I didn't stay home. I packed a bag and went to Diana's. We sat on her couch, the TV muted, the city lights flickering through the window. You didn't just expose him, she said finally. You exposed others. I never named anyone else, I replied. You didn't have to. The next morning the first article appeared. Not about the trial. About a quiet resignation. A board member. Then another. A foundation dissolving by mutual agreement. Patterns. The same ones Richard used to hide behind. Only now they were unraveling. I realized something then. The system didn't collapse loudly. It leaked. One thread at a time. Days passed. No more calls. No more messages. Until a small package arrived at Diana's door. Inside was a single flash drive. No note. No explanation. We didn't plug it in right away. We called the detective. Forensics handled it. What they found changed everything. Encrypted files. Financial records. Shell companies. And one folder labeled simply, Insurance Adjustments. Inside were documents tying Richard to multiple cases, not just Diana's. Elderly clients. Isolated patients. Small policy corrections that added up to millions. This goes beyond fraud, the detective said. This is organized. And now they know I have it, I said. Yes, he replied. But they also know you won't bury it. I stared at the drive resting on the table like a weight. What happens now? Diana asked. I didn't answer immediately, because for the first time since this began the choice was mine. I could step back. Disappear. Let the system handle it. Or I could do what I'd already been doing without realizing it. Tell the truth. Not loudly. Not emotionally. But completely. I think, I said slowly. This is bigger than the trial ever was. Diana nodded. Then don't stop. That night I opened a new document. Not evidence. Not testimony. A record. Names. Dates. Connections. A map of quiet harm. I titled it simply, What Survives the Verdict? And as I began to write I understood something at last. Justice doesn't end when the gavel falls. Sometimes that's when the real work begins. The trial had exposed one man. But the files revealed a network. And the next step would put me directly in its path. The next morning I didn't feel like myself. Coffee in hand, laptop open. The weight of the flash drive pressed against my palm like a warning I couldn't ignore. Diana had left early for her follow-up appointment. I was alone with the files, alone with the decision I'd made. Every name, every transaction, every manipulated policy screamed danger. And somewhere someone knew I had the evidence. I thought of Richard and Cassidy. Prison wouldn't protect me from accomplices. And if the network extended farther than we realized, then nothing was safe. I glanced at the clock. 8:17 a.m. A knock at the door. Too early for anyone I knew. I froze. My instinct screamed. The door cracked open. A man I didn't recognize slipped inside. He was lean, wearing black, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. Miss Reynolds. His voice was calm, almost polite. I backed away. Who are you? He held up a badge, not a police badge. Security? Federal? I couldn't tell. Name's Agent Cole. I'm here to help. You've stumbled onto something bigger than any of us imagined. Help? I echoed. Or scare me into silence? Both, he admitted. You've got information that people will kill for. Literally. And now that you know it, you're a target. But I can get you through this. Safe, secure, protected. You just need to cooperate. I considered slamming the door, running, burning the flash drive. But something about him, something about the way he spoke, confident but not threatening, made me pause. What kind of cooperation? Information. Interviews. Documentation. You keep everything safe, give us the key connections. We take down the network. I exhaled. My hands were shaking. You're telling me the system I trusted, the hospitals, the doctors, some of them are part of it? He nodded. It's not every doctor, not every administrator, but enough to make it lethal. And you've already proven you're not afraid to act. That's why we need you. I thought of Diana, asleep in her apartment, recovering slowly from the sedatives, the strokes, the betrayal. What would happen if I didn't act? What about my sister? I asked. Is she safe? She is, he said firmly. For now. But the moment you engage, her safety depends on your discretion. And mine. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just a story anymore. It wasn't just a personal fight. It was a war in the shadows, and we were the front line. Agent Cole glanced at the laptop, then at the flash drive. We need a secure location. Safe from cameras, phones, trackers. Can you move this data? I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility crush me. Every second I hesitated was a second they could strike. By mid-afternoon, we were in a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town. No windows. Cameras, but they weren't connected to the network. A single steel door with a keypad. Cole worked quickly, scanning the flash drive, verifying encryption, mapping files to safe servers. All the while I watched, listening to the hum of computers, feeling the tension in my chest like an electric current. This network, Cole said finally, leaning back, is more extensive than you realize. Eldercare, insurance fraud, asset theft. And there's evidence they've been trying to cover up murders disguised as natural deaths for years. I swallowed. And you're telling me I'm supposed to help take it down? He nodded. You already did it once. You caught Richard before he finished. Now this is bigger. And you've got the eyes and instincts for it. I looked at the files, at the names, at the bank accounts, the hidden emails, the false records. Fear washed over me, but it wasn't fear of failure. It was fear of what would happen if I didn't do this. Suddenly my phone buzzed. A single text. We know you're not alone. My heart raced. Cole glanced at the screen. They're watching. I didn't need him to say more. I picked up the flash drive, gripping it like a lifeline. Then we start now. Cole nodded. We start now. And we move fast. Every hour matters. For the first time since Diana collapsed, I felt clarity. Fear was still there, but it was sharpened, focused. I wasn't a victim. I was an instrument. And for the first time I understood what Nurse Jenkins meant when she said, sometimes you have to trust yourself, even if no one else does. We worked through the night. Files cross-referenced, patterns identified, connections drawn. The web of deceit was massive, far larger than Richard and Cassidy, but every piece of evidence brought us closer to dismantling it. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, I knew the real battle was only just beginning. By dawn, the warehouse felt heavier than it had the night before. Not because of fear, but because the truth was finally clear. Agent Cole stood in front of a wall of screens filled with names, faces, dates, and transactions. Each one represented a stolen life, a manipulated death, a family that never knew the truth. Richard and Cassidy were only the beginning. They were amateurs compared to what we were staring at now. This is enough, Cole said quietly. More than enough. I didn't feel relief. I felt anger. Anger that my sister had almost been erased by greed. Anger that nurses like Jenkins were silenced, threatened, dismissed. Anger that people trusted the system, and the system betrayed them. Cole turned to me. Once we move, there's no turning back. Are you ready? I thought of Diana, alive, breathing, rebuilding herself piece by piece. I thought of that pen hovering over the paper. 10 minutes. That was all it took to save her life. I've been ready since I didn't sign, I said. At 7:42 a.m. the operation began. Federal investigators moved in silence. Warrants were executed across 3 states. Hospital administrators were escorted out of offices they'd ruled for decades. Doctors who'd hidden behind white coats were handcuffed in hallways where they once played gods. By noon the news broke. Multi-state medical fraud and attempted murder ring exposed. I watched it on a muted TV in the safe room. Reporters spoke in shock, struggling to explain how deep the corruption went. They talked about illegal sedation, falsified brain death reports, coerced DNR signatures, and life insurance schemes that preyed on the vulnerable. They didn't say my name. They didn't say Diana's. And that was fine. We didn't do this for recognition. 2 days later, I sat beside Diana's bed again, this time in sunlight. She was awake, alert, coloring in a sketchbook like she used to when we were kids. They're gone, I said softly. All of them. She looked up at me, her eyes steady. I knew you'd protect me. You always did. For the first time since that hospital room, I let myself cry. Richard eventually pleaded guilty. So did Cassidy. Dr. Carlson turned on the rest of the network to reduce his sentence. Some of them will never see daylight again. And Nurse Jenkins? She didn't lose her license. She was promoted. A national award for medical ethics was created in her name. And yes, Diana funded that scholarship she promised. Every year, one student will receive it. A reminder that courage still exists in quiet places. 3 months later, Diana and I stood on the cliffs of Positano, the sea stretching endlessly beneath us. She walks slower now but stronger. Alive. Free. You know, she said, smiling into the sunset. Richard thought my life was something he could cash out. I laughed softly. He was wrong. I was worth fighting for, she said. And so were you. That night, I thought about the people watching this story. People who might be sitting in waiting rooms. People being pressured into signing something they don't fully understand. People being told, this is the only option. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes all it takes is 10 minutes. 10 minutes to pause. 10 minutes to listen to your instincts. 10 minutes to save a life. And if you've ever had that feeling, that quiet voice telling you something isn't right, don't ignore it. It might be the most important warning you'll ever receive. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe for more powerful, real-inspired stories. And comment below which country you're watching from. Your voice matters more than you know. Because somewhere out there, someone else is standing in front of a decision, and your comment might help them choose life.